I'm going to go ahead and get started with the introductions for the event. Thank you everyone for joining us if you're just now joining. This event is focused on finding work-life balance in biotech, or really wherever you are in the life science environment. A lot of the techniques and skills that our guest speakers will be sharing will work for you as well. I want to introduce our speakers. So we have joining us today, Megan Bliss and Neil Williams. Megan joins us from the Tufts Launchpad Biolabs, where she has been working towards incorporating mindfulness and self-care into day-to-day site operations. Prior to her career in biotech, Megan worked in veterinary medicine, managing oncology, neurology, and emergency cases as a certified pet loss and bereavement counselor. Megan has been a practitioner of mindful meditation for over 15 years and is a graduate of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program through the UMass Memorial Center for Mindfulness. In 2020, Megan was invited to lead virtual meditation and yoga sessions through Lab Central and has co-led a mindful meditation therapy group on the South Shore for the past 10 years. And Neil has 2 Masters of Science in Horticulture and Plant Breeding and Plant Genetics, specializing in molecular markers. After graduating from college, he embarked on a whirlwind journey through several major seed and chemical companies. In 2019, he was fired for the 5th time, this time from a small family-owned seed company, and delved into personal development, and this developed into coaching practice, helping others avoid similar pitfalls that he encountered. So we have a wide variety of expertise from several areas of not only biotech, but STEM tech in general, and a lot of lived experience to share as well. And so I would like to start with inviting Megan. Would you like to share a little bit about your career journey and about your approach to work-life balance and what that means to you?
Thank you. Welcome everybody. This is a wonderful turnout, and I'm so excited to share today with you. As Erin was saying, I started in veterinary medicine many years ago, and I started just as a receptionist, working in emergency, taking care of the humans that came with the animals, and that built over time a career of basically helping to support people who were grieving, who were in difficult situations where there was emotional turmoil. Also, in veterinary medicine, it is known to be a very high stress career, and unfortunately, burnout and compassion fatigue are very common. And so, having become a certified pet loss and bereavement counselor, working with people, studying mindfulness, mindful meditation practice, and incorporating that into self-care, whether you are experiencing burnout, whether you are experiencing emotional turmoil through grief, through work stress, it's become a passion of mine. And so, moving into biotech and being in Boston, where I'm located, it's such an amazing community here. But I'm seeing a lot of similarities between many of the specialty veterinarians that I worked with that were working 15-hour shifts, and giving of themselves, but not really taking care of themselves in the way they needed to. So it's been a wonderful sort of adventure, helping to bring meditation, mindfulness, self-care practices into the biotech community, and certainly through the pandemic, it was such a a time of great stress and trauma for everybody. So self-care and tools, strategies for self-care were just essential. And so being able to lead even virtual, weekly meditation sessions and yoga sessions for scientists across our local community was a wonderful thing to be able to share. So I'm excited to share my experiences with everybody, and it's not as specialized as you think. I mean, it really comes down to basic self-care and just checking in with yourself. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, it's been quite a journey, and you have to be there and have been in it to really grow with it. So that's where I am right now, still growing, still learning, and sharing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Neil, do you have a few words you'd like to say about your personal career journey, the kind of triumphs and setbacks, how it's led you to where you are now, and what work-life balance means to you?
First of all, thank you very much, Erin and Helen, for putting this together. I wish that, 20 years ago, when I had left the university system, this kind of thing had been available to me, because my professor thought that he was sending me out into the world completely prepared, having finished my master's degree and a new copy of the 1 Minute Manager in my hand. So the first thing that I did was I got a job at Monsanto. And within a year, I was fired because I ticked off my boss's boss, because I wasn't taught how to work within the political structure of a large company. And that it surprised me. I thought, if you know what you're talking about and you do good work, they can't fire you. I was wrong. And so I moved through several companies, continuing to move toward a plant breeding position. And I got my dream job, but once again, I didn't understand myself and I didn't understand my boss. And so we began to argue and have conflict. And guess which one of us won? Needless to say, it wasn't me. And so I moved to another seed company. And once again, there was a lack of training, a lack of understanding on my part. I didn't know what I knew I was capable of doing the work, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And so less than a year later, I was fired from that. And then I was eventually, and I went into a deep depression at this point, because I couldn't understand what was going on. And at some point, I picked up a book, The Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And it began to click for the first time what had been happening in my life that had caused so much chaos, that had caused so much discontent, disorganization, and had caused me to get into so much conflict with both my boss and with my other coworkers. And finally, I joined a small family-owned seed company. And after 2 years, I got fired. But this time, instead of going into depression, I went into a deep dive study of myself. And the positive side of that is that a year and a half later, I'm actually now back working for that same company, but on a much more amenable schedule and a lot better footing, because I understand myself within the system now. So we are very important machines in the operation of every business. And we deserve to understand ourselves so that we can contribute better.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being so open about sharing some of the less glamorous but still learning experiences side. I know there's a lot of people probably attending who have had similar setbacks, whether it's being let go from a position or really preparing for multiple interviews and facing the dreaded thank you but no thank you letter. So I think it's really helpful to hear how to rebound and grow from those kind of experiences as well. So I have a few questions to kind of lead the discussion, but I definitely encourage kind of going off topic, as it were, a little bit here and there as necessary to kind of fill in the gaps, because we know from, I think all of us, work-life balance is a fairly big umbrella, and want to cover some of the things that maybe people are thinking about but don't know exactly what they want to ask. So first, for the attendees, how can the attendees who are here discover what an ideal work-life balance looks like for them? Let's start with Megan.
Thank you. So I think kind of going back to basics, like I said, this isn't a very specialized realm. You're really checking in with yourself, and you want to establish a baseline of what are my core values? What is important to you at a base level that you need to ensure a good quality of life? What resonates with who you are and who you want to be as a person? I started with making a list of my core values. I didn't even know what they were. What do I really want out of not just work and career, but out of life? What rings true for my goals? And so I think making a list of your core values and then sit down with that list and really see how they align with your current status and situation. If you feel strongly and passionately about something that is not working its way into your life in any aspect, I mean, that's significant and needs to be addressed and needs your attention. So then building off of this list of core values and brainstorming what you need to get there in your work, in your personal life, in your relationships. It's a very basic starting point, but it comes from self-awareness and just really understanding your basic wants and needs, and then building off of that.
Would you say the core values are those things that would be fairly constant throughout your life, or do you see core values as things that could shift a little bit?
I think a little bit of both, honestly. I mean, we have our core personalities, we have our core beliefs, but as everybody knows, as you grow and you change and you become different people, and you learn from your mistakes, and you build off of that. And so there's just this continuation of sort of self-knowledge. So your core values do change, but a lot of times they are within the same kind of family, where it's just more detailed what you need to meet the person you are at the time.
It's also good because you could potentially, you think about work, right? You can have different avenues to have your values and needs met. If one avenue is not going to be feasible or possible, there's still ways to work with your colleagues, your work, your boss, right, to still get your values met.
Absolutely. And maybe I'm just an optimist, but I feel like there's always a way. as long as you are in touch with where you want to be, with what you want out of a situation or out of your life. I think there's always a way to build towards it. And if one way doesn't work, if a relationship doesn't work, and with a colleague, or then you can go about things differently, see something in a different way. But you have that baseline of your core values, and knowing that you're always going to be in line with yourself if you follow the story of those core values, for sure.
Thank you. Neil, what would you say to attendees about how can they go about defining what an ideal work-life balance looks like for them?
Okay. So going back to something I said earlier, you are an important machine in the organization that you work in. And the reason that I say that is because when I was at the University of Florida, we had a PCR machine, and they were fairly new, so it was not as well of a developed machine as they probably have now. And so you kind of had to stick your tongue on the roof of your, stand on one foot, and hope that the moon was in the right phase in order to get everything to work. Well, I thought it was magic, but eventually we had a lab technician who said, no, you have to get everything just right. But he had done enough experimentation to figure out what it was that needed to be done right. And so in my life, I have discovered that experimenting, you wouldn't begin using a machine without reading the manual, or at least look on YouTube somewhere, find something to explain how this complex organism works. And we are the same way. I mean, there are so many different aspects of our lives, the values, our physical body, our mental body, our spiritual body, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And if we aren't doing some kind of study and at least a little bit of experimentation to see what works, we're missing out on the opportunity to optimize one of the most valuable machines in the company, which is us. And so, I wasn't aware of the opportunities that are out there. There are books on every aspect. Megan, how many different kinds of meditation are there that you know of?
Many.
Yeah.
Many.
And the reason there are so many is because a different one might work for you than works for me. And maybe a certain meditation or a certain nutrition, a certain vitamin improves my performance by 1%. Another one may improve my performance by 3%. Come on, you all know those are big numbers in our world. Those are significant. And so taking the time, Megan brought up values. Take the time to figure out what your values are. You can't live them if you don't know what they are. And so that would be, to me, the first step in figuring out how to develop a work-life balance, is start to do some intentional experiments.
Yeah, and probably another component of that is not feeling guilty about taking that time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and allow yourself to fail. I mean, people, The first time you were in chemistry lab, it may not have worked exactly the way you wanted it to, but after a little bit of time and experience, now it works every single time.
Going off that about starting to implement small experiments. I know Megan, you mentioned meditation, things like that. What are some kind of small scale tools that attendees could start implementing in their even during working hours or very busy schedules to start trying out some of these work-life balance strategies? Yeah.
Sure. So I really support the smallest movement in any direction as a moment for growth and a moment of awareness. So again, I think it comes back to knowing yourself and your needs. Just sort of sitting yourself down and asking, how do I use my emotional energy? What drains and what replenishes this energy? Am I an introvert who may require extra time by myself? Am I an extrovert who is fueled by social interaction and communication? How you use your emotional energy is tied closely to how you feel physically. And then if you're constantly feeling drained, exhausted, depleted on a day-to-day basis, it will lead to burnout. So starting from something as simple as making a checklist of what you need personally and professionally each day. Break it down to a day, break it down to half a day. Think of what your normal routine is when you're getting up in the morning and you're getting ready for work. And do you eat breakfast? You can break your experience down into moments, and each moment is a chance to build a tool, to build a strategy where you can show yourself self-care. Something that I do is I actually have a reminder in my phone that tells me to drink water. You wouldn't think that that's something that maybe a human needs to know or be reminded about. It's like breathing, don't forget to breathe. But I know multiple times a day, my little alarm is going to go off. And it's almost like, you know what, phone, that's a really good idea. I think I will have a drink of water. But it just is a little reminder to myself, hey, self-care, dial it back for just a moment, tap into yourself, check in with how you're feeling, and then move forward. It could be a minute, just check in with yourself. Certain other notes that I made, even if it's a 2 minutes of deep breathing, back to paying attention to your breath. If you can communicate, if you're comfortable communicating your basic needs to your colleagues, I need to eat. It's so simple, but it's amazing how something like that will just slip through the cracks, and saying, hey, I need to step back and actually, I need to eat something. I need to take care of myself so I can be the best I can be. So anyway, do something, no matter how small, that brings you joy each day. And that is absolutely within the realm of work as well. Having a good conversation, having a laugh, something that triggers joy. Even if you feel you can't, you can schedule time for it. So yeah, those are just some little tricks that I've used in the past that have been it's like a little pocket mindfulness.
I'm curious, do you find that initially setting those kind of check-ins around a physiological need, like you're saying, drinking water, or eating, or even, say getting up and stretching your legs, even sitting well, do you feel like that's helped you get into the practice of checking in about other things, like how you're feeling?
Absolutely.
Like, it's easier to start checking in about things that we all need to do, and then it gets you in the practice of checking in about how you're feeling as far as your needs being met?
Absolutely. I mean, everything manifests itself in the body physically. So, I mean, if you're stressed, if you are again, working like a 15-hour shift and not eating, or, it's manifesting itself initially in your body physically. So that's how you tap into, hey body, how you doing? Check in, set these reminders for yourself, and then that also triggers more check-ins. And then that also triggers not just how am I feeling physically, but how am I feeling emotionally? What other needs are not being met, either professionally, personally, or other. Absolutely.
Thank you. Neil, what kind of small intro strategies or tips that the attendees could start applying in their working hours or working days do you suggest to kind of start getting into the work-life balance practice?
Well, I think Megan has done a great job of breathe. Honestly, one of the biggest things that we forget about is that nobody can control your breath. Not even you can't stop your breath. It's essential. But we don't take control of it. Another factor that's really small is sleep. It's really small. Everybody does it, but nobody thinks about it. But you miss it, and your productivity goes downhill really, really fast. And so one of the things that I learned that I had never thought about before is I need a different amount than 8 hours of sleep every night. My kids need a different amount than 8 hours of sleep every night. My teenagers need less or more, and not all of us are the same. Aaron, you're different from me. Megan, you're different from Aaron. We're all different. I wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and I feel energized and ready to go. My wife wakes up at 10 o'clock in the morning and feels groggy and sleepy. By 8 o'clock at night, I'm ready to go to bed. 8 o'clock at night is when she gets her burst of energy. She's most creative and ready to produce. Do you know what your schedule is? Don't assume that because we work from 8 to 5, that all of those hours are going to be equally productive. Start to track yourself. And I love setting alarms. In fact, Megan and Aaron heard one of my alarms just as we were starting. And it's just, okay, stop, take a moment, reconnect with yourself, and then move forward with more energy. Because when we forget ourselves and are constantly looking outside of ourselves, we lose the power that we were born with. And so take that moment to reconnect with your power. Figure out when you are the most creative. And it might be you need to adjust your schedule if that's possible. Because if you're one of those people who are most creative at 7 p.m., I don't care how much your boss tells you you have to be there at 8 a.m., you're probably not going to produce as much. And if you're a manager, set the meeting for the time when you are the most active and engaged, rather than at the time that it's always been set, because that met your predecessor's best work schedule. Those are small things that you have power to adjust, or you can begin to think about how you can work at your maximum. Those are my thoughts.
And I imagine in kind of rearranging your schedule like that, that's a nice way to get essentially more done, or be more productive in less time. Kind of goes to the kind of mindset. I think I mentioned in our discussions going into the workshop that work-life balance doesn't mean that you spend less time on work and therefore get less done. It actually can benefit your work as well. In, like you said, if you focus on working around the hours when you're most productive, no matter where those hours fall, if it's not, during, what someone would consider standard hours, that can actually still be a net positive because you can get more done, and company likes that. And then you have more time to focus on, again, that kind of discovery of more of what works for you and more of what meets your needs.
Yep. Yeah, work smart as well as hard, and you may not need to work as long.
So how can attendees advocate for work-life balance that works for them to their mentors or supervisors? Like I imagine some of the smaller things, like starting out just checking in with yourself every hour or so. That's fairly small, but when it comes to maybe advocating for bigger changes that benefits your work-life balance, and benefits your productivity and your overall happiness, how can you advocate for that to maybe more resistant supervisors or managers?
Well, I would say once you've established your core values, once you have checked in with yourself and you know who you want to be at work and where your goals are, I think discussing them as though they are non-negotiable is essential. So it's not, hey, I really need some time off. I'm working myself into exhaustion here. It doesn't have to be this sort of story. Your needs are valid and they are non-negotiable. And so if you present them in a way, basically when discussing work progress, quality, or productivity, you can detail a work plan that already includes your scheduled self-care actions as part of your workday. So saying it, if you are working 10 hours over the course of, morning, afternoon, and evening, that's 3 meals that you'll be at work. Scheduling time to actually have those meals, and incorporating that into your, well, in the morning, I'm going to get XYZ done until, this point, and then I'm going to take a break. And then, so presenting that as already a plan in progress, non-negotiable, but is how you are going to be the most effective, and you're going to be the best version of yourself. It sets a precedent that taking care of yourself and doing good work actually go hand in hand. Being your own advocate is essential, and addressing your very basic needs is what I consider a radical act of self-compassion. So when you speak about your needs, you are telling others that this is what you require to be your best, to do your best work, and to be fully available. And so to me, that's it's kind of a foolproof argument, because it's basically already been decided that this is what needs to happen for you to be your best, and who doesn't want your best? So.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you. I wonder, so setting things like I'm taking a break for lunch from this time to this time. How do you keep that from being kind of impeded on? I know I've had, I think maybe all of us had, but I've had, managers or supervisors in the past who have kind of nicely done the, I know it's your lunch, but I need to talk to you right now. And sometimes it's an emergency and that's okay. Sometimes it's not. What are your thoughts on that? Is it best to keep it as, a hard and fast like rule of this is my break and this is my time for me? Um, is it okay to be more flexible with that, or does that open the door to it then kind of always being an option to interrupt that time?
I think in addition to these core values that you've established and are now a part of you, boundaries are essential. And so knowing what your boundaries are in any given situation. So I am certainly never the type of person to say to say no all the time in a situation. But it's also 100% okay to say, let me just finish my meal, give me 10 minutes, and I'll be with you and more available then. It's reasonable. And again, you kind of have to be your own parent. You think of it that way, where it's just sort of like, no, Megan needs to finish her lunch and then she'll talk to you, sort of thing. But your own PR representative kind of, so if you are comfortable and really comfortable, not obligatory comfortable, eating and talking to your boss about some work-related thing, then that's within the realm of what's acceptable. If it becomes a regular thing that occurs, then that needs to be reevaluated, because this is your time that you've specifically allotted for yourself. But if you're comfortable, if you're not comfortable with it, if you do feel strongly that this is my time and I don't want to, I want to have a mindful meal and be present as I eat this and not talk about work, or then it's absolutely okay to say, give me 15 minutes and I will be right with you. Very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Neil, how would you suggest attendees go about advocating for the work-life balance strategy that they find after some experimentation works for them?
So I'm married and I have 8 kids. And one of the things that always frustrated me the most is that I wanted something and I would not get it. My wife wanted something and she would get it. And there was one thing that was different between the two of us. She would ask. She would ask for what she needed. She would ask for what she wanted. I would hope, I would infer, I would hint, and I would not get. You will never, ever get what you do not ask for. If you do ask for it, you've got a 50-50 chance. Seems like pretty good odds to me. So after you've done some experimentation, go to your boss or go to your supervisor, go to your leader, go to the mirror and say, hey, I need these things. Just like Megan was saying, advocate for yourself, but ask. There's a lot more flexibility. And if you explain, hey, I need to eat mindfully, I'm working on this aspect of my life, maybe you wrap it into a goal that you have. Tell your personal growth, explain for 15 minutes every day, I am going to read a book about improvement in a certain area of my life, whether it's brain health, physical health, anything. Make it applicable to what you're doing, but wrap it into your goals. Those are small things that you can do. And your supervisor then becomes engaged in helping you achieve. Hey, so how's that reading coming? They'll want to learn then as well. But you have to be willing to ask. And that scared me to death for a long time. But finally, I picked up on my wife's trick, and it works. Yes, I get no's, but you know what? I found out a no didn't kill me. That would be the #1 suggestion. And it's exactly what Megan said. You've got to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and you're saying even if it's just kind of practice, if you need to practice a little bit initially, like you're saying, to a mirror to yourself to get up the courage to ask, then I think, as you're mentioning, there are going to be some no's, but they're going to feel a lot less personal. They're going to hurt. They're going to hit a lot less, and you're going to get braver and braver about asking for it, and being excited about the yeses and growing from the no's.
Yeah, one of my favorite mentors was a guy who went out and he made strange requests for something like 90 days. And he realized that when somebody says no, it has nothing to do with him. And some of the stuff he asked, people said, sure, why not? Because it didn't hurt them. And he was surprised at some of the stuff that people said yes to. But how are you going to know if you don't ask?
Right. We might have some attendees who have come because maybe they're already kind of teetering on the edge, or beginning to feel like maybe they're being a little bit burnt out at work. If you are already in that phase where you're feeling burnt out and demotivated, what are some suggestions you have for the initially recovering from burnout?
This was something that I encountered so much in veterinary medicine, and like I said, seeing these young veterinarians, interns or residents that are working these long shifts, that are thankless. It's burnout is common, and I see it in biotech as well. And I would tell people, colleagues, and I would tell people who were grieving also, if you're suffering from emotional exhaustion or burnout, care for yourselves like you would a sick child or a sick parent. Treat yourself as though you have very basic needs that require your attention. And so it's imperative that we learn not only to nourish our bodies, but our minds. So you want to start with addressing immediate physical symptoms. Like I said, everything manifests itself in the body, and that's one way to tap into it. If you just feel burnt out, but you can't even put your finger on it, come back to the body, check in with your body, and make note of what sensations you're feeling. I consider it an urgent need. If you truly believe that you have gone beyond fatigue and you're going into burnout, and you're just questioning if you're even on the right career path, or if you just want to give up, anything like that, that's urgent, and that needs your attendance as soon as possible and takes priority. So many, and this is very common that I've seen in this field, and with scientific-minded people who are so passionate, and they're working so hard that they will sense that they're burning out and just keep pushing through it, and enduring much more than they should, and not allowing themselves to actually stop. So taking time to recover is essential. Actively engaging in self-compassion is the key to recovery. So I just made some notes. Of course, everyone would love to take time off. It's not usually possible, especially if you're a student, or if if you're a researcher who is in a project that needs your full attention. But even a long weekend, doing something that brings you joy can be restorative and bring you back to yourself. Absolutely reasonable to seek professional support. So if you're feeling depleted, if you're feeling physically exhausted, schedule an appointment with your doctor. Schedule or meet a therapist. You can join support groups, guided meditation sessions, even deep tissue massage. These are all explanations of self-care that you're offering yourself. You can unplug from electronics for any period of time. That's an act of self-care. Scheduling regular physical activity, joining a gym, walking every day, yoga, hiking, swimming, mindful eating and meal planning. I mentioned this before, but that's a way to nourish yourself. And connecting with friends, family, or joining a community whose members share your core values, whether it's religious, spiritual, community service, volunteering. And again, back to just actively engaging in an activity that brings you joy. That's a huge piece to work-life balance. If you are going to be spending so much time and energy in your work, there's got to be that leisure. There's got to be that moment of joy that echoes that as well.
Thank you. I definitely agree with having some kind of network or group that you're connected to outside of your fellow employees. It's great to have a strong relationship with your fellow employees, but especially if you're feeling burnt out from work, I think it is helpful to have a group outside of your fellow employees, not even to talk about your concerns with, but just to have in your life.
Community.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice reminder also that work isn't everything.
Yes.
To have them as well. And Neil, before we get to questions, you have some suggestions on how to combat burnout, or I guess recover is a better word, recover from burnout once it has occurred.
I love what Megan has said. She's absolutely correct. The only word that I would add is give yourself permission. Because your body is so fantastic, your mind is so amazing that you will either rest or your body will make you. And so give yourself permission to sit down, relax before your body forces you to do so.
Absolutely.
So kind of along those lines, if you're continuing to try to push through a situation where you're feeling burnout and unmotivated, without taking that time to recover, however that looks for you, you're actually probably getting not a whole lot of work done during that time for the hours that you're putting in, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
So
you're much less efficient.
Exactly. So in the last 5 minutes, I wanted to open up to any attendees who have questions that they'd like to address to the speakers. Go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get them answered for you. This is a great opportunity if you have any specific questions you'd like to have addressed, maybe about any current situations that you're dealing with, or current concerns. One thing I think we've kind of already, do companies have people you can go to for help in these situations? Who would you suggest? Maybe even as a like an ombudsman or a mediator for some of these things. Well,
in my experience, if you have an HR person, this is what they're there for, specifically somebody to reach out to if you need support, and then they can help guide you in the right direction. Not every company has an HR department. Not every company has an HR person that is accessible or that you feel like you can go to. So I definitely think that's why it's important to communicate your needs to your coworkers, to your colleagues, to your boss, because they're on the same page. They understand where you're coming from, and they potentially could also be a resource for you as well. But absolutely, it's not always something that's common or readily accessible, and it should be.
Yeah, my experience has been that even HR is not trained on this. And so you really do have to advocate for yourself. You are the only one who knows you as well as you know you.
Good question here. It will, I think, kind of tie into that one. If you say you don't have someone to go to, or there's a colleague you notice is maybe struggling with burnout or seems, very down or demotivated, how can you maybe go about helping or approaching them?
In my experience, checking in with somebody and just saying, how are you doing really? How's your baseline? And then also sharing. Sharing is a huge way. When I talk about community, it's a huge way to connect with somebody and say, look, I'm experiencing, these I statements that we've all been told on how to communicate. I am experiencing XYZ. Is there anything you feel comfortable sharing, or have you experienced anything like that historically or currently? I think that's huge.
Yeah. If you have the capacity for a colleague, listen to them. If not, find a coach that you trust and recommend them. A lot of coaches will do a 1 hour free or a half hour free session, but to be truly listened to often is very therapeutic. That's why counselors, coaches, so many of these people are sought after, and the field is growing. If not, tell your coworkers, hey, I just went to a great weekend retreat for meditation. I feel so much better. Just telling them there are resources out there they may not have ever looked, and so they may not know it's possible. And they then won't feel so weird saying, really? How did it feel? What did you do? How much did it cost? Where did you go? They may begin to understand that there are resources they have not been aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good end to just mention that the resources are out there. If you feel like maybe a direct approach is not going to be as well received, or is going, if you're worried about seeming a little too invasive, just making them aware that there are resources out there.
Yeah, it's generally easier to listen to or be heard by or talk to or be heard by a stranger rather than a friend or a colleague, especially.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us and sharing your insight and resources. I know this is a really exciting event for Seismic. It's a tool that's so vital, no matter where you work and what work you do, but it's especially applicable to STEM majors and people working in the industry. And it's a tool that's not talked about or taught as much as it should be.
It's not, no. And it's so essential. It's so essential. and it's just not, more and more it's becoming in public domain. But yeah, piece by piece.
Yep. Learn everywhere you can, because somebody has studied every part of you. There's a book out there. Just give yourself permission to go out and look it up. Or they made a video on it or a podcast. It's all out there. You just got to give yourself time and permission, or take time and permission to go out and seek it.
Well, thank you, Erin, so much. This has really been wonderful, and thank you everybody for joining. Hopefully there have been some insights that we've shared that will help you even just a little bit. So we appreciate it.
1% better. You can do it.